Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm so excited to welcome Alison Tafel to the podcast. Alison is a TV writer and actor. Her writing credits include BoJack Horseman and The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Welcome, Alison.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Very excited to be chatting with you. And a fellow Alison with one L.
Yes,
you know?
the 1L Alison. Yes, of course.
So I wanted to start by asking you, how did you get your start in the TV industry? I know you have a background in improv and sketch comedy, so how did that lead to your first job working for television?
I moved to Los Angeles in 2012, and before that I was in Chicago, and I was doing stuff at Second City and IO and things like that, and I moved to Los Angeles with the goal of working on television in some capacity. And so my very first job right when I moved out here in LA was I was a CBS page, which is the wearing the blazer and the tie and working on the CBS lots. And so it was really fun, actually. I got to work on like The Price is Right and American Idol and Dancing with the Stars, and then also some sitcoms as well, and late night. At the time, it wasn't James Corden, or the Late Show. It wasn't Corden. It was Craig. That was my first start, was being a CBS page.
And so then, what was your first job specifically within the TV industry, and then how did that lead to you getting a staffing job on BoJack Horseman specifically?
Well, yeah, so CBS was kind of the starting point because I got to work on so many different TV shows that kind of gave me the experience that people are looking for. And then from that, I really kind of went up the ladder of working on television as a writer in a very classic way, in that my first job, or my job after CBS, was to be a production assistant, a PA on a sitcom called Raising Hope on Fox. And a production assistant is like the person who's, the lowest pay and the longest hours, and you're making copies and you're stocking the kitchen and you're delivering scripts and you're setting up table reads, like you're kind of doing all the grunt work. So from there, it really was just me meeting everybody who is on that show. I mean, a lot of Los Angeles is kind of getting to know people and getting a Rolodex of people who can mentor you and help you with your career. So from being a PA, I then worked my way up to being an executive assistant, which is the assistant to the show creators for a Disney Channel show. And then from there, I became a writer's assistant on another Disney Channel show, just kind of slowly working my way up as I got more experience. And while I was doing that, I was also writing all the time. I also really wanted to be a writer. So I was working on my own personal scripts and personal projects. And in 2016, through all of that hard work, I was able to land a manager and an agent. And I told them I loved BoJack Horseman, and it just so happened that BoJack was hiring. So they submitted a writing sample of mine to BoJack, and I got an interview, and I got hired. So that's a very truncated, simple way of saying it. Obviously, there's a lot more twists and turns, but yeah, I did a very classic start from the bottom and work your way up kind of journey to being a writer.
That's amazing. That's really cool. Yeah, of course, because it's always, you have to get your foot in the door, and then once you're in there, it is a matter of, as you said, who you know, and getting your name out there, and always be working on your own stuff in addition to all of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's finding that balance. It's also like, I was a hard worker. I worked hard at all the jobs that I had, and so I think it gave me a nice reputation for people to like then recommend me for the other job. And luckily there was a lot of downtime in lots of my jobs. So any chance I had to sit at, my little desk at whatever job I was at, I was working on my own scripts. Yeah. Nice.
So can you tell me, what was the interview process like for BoJack Horseman?
I was so scared. It was really nice. It was just me meeting with the showrunner, Raphael Waxberg, and then our two producers from Tornante, Noel and Steve. So it was just the three of them. And, at that point, when you're getting the interview, in my opinion, it's about just them seeing if you can be in a room with a person for a really long time. I mean, I think it's knowing by that point they knew my writing, they read a sample, they liked it, they knew that I had an ability that they liked. And I think the interview process is pretty much just seeing if you can like hang, seeing if you can chat and if you had things to contribute, because the last thing you want in a room with all writers is to like not jive well with like a writer, to not like to not. So it was a very casual conversation. They asked me about my experience at Disney, and they asked about my experience just in the comedy world, and then they did ask me if I had ideas about the show. And obviously if you go into an interview like that, you should have ideas ready to tell them. And I was such a huge fan. I mean, the story I tell people all the time with BoJack is I think I was like the fan who was hired to write on the show. I was such a huge fan that I pitched some ideas that I had, and then it turned out my first season on the show, we did a couple of the ideas. I don't think it was my idea that they used. I think they just realized with the ideas that I pitched, they were like, oh, we were planning on going in that direction. Wow, you really have your mind in the same place we do. So that was pretty nice. But it was it was like, a 20-minute interview. I left like shaking, going, well, at least I got the interview, and went back to my Disney Channel job.
So can you talk about your first day in the writer's room? So was it essentially kind of dipping your toes as a new writer, or just kind of contributing right away? Like, how does that work?
Oh my goodness, I was just thrown in there. It was insane. They hired me on a Monday, and I started on the Tuesday. So like, I had to leave my Disney job, like basically right when I got the phone call. It was like, okay, I'm leaving now. And so it was really intimidating to me until I met all the writers, and all the writers are really kind and wonderful on that show, on BoJack. My first day, they had already been in the room for a couple of weeks. So the writers had already gotten started. So I really felt like I was kind of jumping into a moving train. We were already talking about the second episode. And I started the same week, or maybe the same day, as Nick Adams, who cool. I think you spoke to. I listened to that podcast. And so that was really intimidating, because Nick Adams is like an incredible writer who's very experienced. And so he walked in and he was very comfortable and chill. And here I was sitting in a chair like, oh my God, like, what do I do? But yeah, it's really just sitting around a table and brainstorming ideas. And the idea of it being, if you have something to contribute, like, say it. And if you don't, it's okay to keep quiet. That was a big lesson I learned. I thought that I always had to fill in the silence and prove that I belonged. But what I learned, especially my first season of the show, was to really have a full pitch, have a full idea in my head before speaking up, and just learning the lay of the room and learning how everyone works together. It's okay to be quiet to like start out, which was a big lesson for me.
And I want to ask you specifically, when it comes to your writing process, when you sit down to write a script, do you start with a specific scene, or do you start with the first scene? Like, how do you approach writing an episode?
I start with an outline. I start with and even before an outline, kind of a beat sheet. What's the beginning, what's the middle, what's the end. I think personally, it helps me to know the end first, and then know that every step I'm taking is, I know where this is going. I know, I don't really start open-ended when writing stuff. And then, it kind of breaking it down into doing beats, which is literally just a page with like bullet points of like, this happens, and which causes this to happen, which causes this, like a very simplistic story. And then expanding that to an outline, which is just kind of the script in paragraph form, and then expanding that into a script. And I feel like those baby steps make it less intimidating, as opposed to like sitting down and being like, scene one, and like writing the whole scene. But that's my process, and it's, again, a pretty typical process of outlining and then getting notes on the outline and then proceeding to the script. But I think it's always helpful to like know the end. Like I like to know the ending first, because then I have a place to get to.
Right. Yeah, that blank page with the blinking cursor, that's like never fun. Oh my God. So I also want to ask you, what the scripts you wrote in particular. So I know you wrote Stupid Piece of Shit, Interior Sub, Feel Good Story, and of course The View from Halfway Down. Were you able to sit in on the recordings for the episodes you wrote?
I was, yeah.
Nice.
We recorded the actors individually, so for the most part, I got to be part of the recordings. There would be a couple times, like scheduling wise, I didn't, like, for instance, like in The View from Halfway Down, the writer's room we had already wrapped before I think Zach Braff was available to come in to record his part. So I didn't get to like sit in on his recording, which I am such a Zach Braff fan that I always joke, like, that's probably for the best. Like, I probably would have like really embarrassed myself. But Raphael really does try to allow the writers to be there with him, especially if it's like Will Arnett or Alison Brie or, one of our main people. We got to sit in and listen. Yeah.
And then, so say like they did a reading, and then were there ever any like rewrites on the fly with the collaboration with the actor or with Raphael?
Not usually, no. No, not really. Really, by that point, I mean, Raphael's such a good writer. I mean, when you're a writer on BoJack, after you're done, you give the script to Raphael, and he's so incredible that like you can't beat his writing. You know what I mean? So you can't like improve upon it. I've certainly been in a record where maybe an actor wants to deliver it in a different way, or maybe some phrases, doesn't roll off the tongue as easily as this phrase. I do remember one actor being like, no, I don't think my character would say it this way. And you're like, oh yeah, you're right. So that has happened a few times, but it's not like, it's not like Parks and Rec or something where I know they would like film the scene and then they would go, okay, now some fun ones where you just improvise. We didn't do that too much because I just think the script itself was like so good already. Like there's no need to.
So with the season 4 episode, Stupid Piece of Shit in particular, I love that title. Just saying that. Too funny. So with that one, we have, of course, the visuals with BoJack's inner monologue. So I'm assuming that's something that came about like with the animation direction in particular, or was that in the scripts, like his kind of like depicting his inner dialogue in terms of those like scratchy drawing visuals and things like that?
No, yeah, that was all animation. Anne Walker Farrell directed that episode, and she's an incredible animation director. And since that episode, me and her have become really good friends. So I'm just a big fan of her. But that was all her and her team with a visual way to see that, which is cool. No, the script was just the dialogue. The script, I don't think there was any like, and we see his brain. So to see that was how they artistically interpreted that was really, really cool, especially the different style of animation and like the kind of cartoony, I know it is a cartoon, but the cartooniness of that specific animation was so neat to see after they put it together.
That's what's so cool, of course, like the collaboration between animators and writers. That's really amazing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, our animators are like, I say I'm so sad, like BoJack's over.
I know, oh my God.
The animators on that show were just incredible, and in so many ways were also writers on the show with what they contributed and how they interpreted stuff, and there's so many jokes, like a lot of the background jokes and background visuals, that's all animation. Like that is not actually many of the writers, it's all the animators. They were all hilarious writers in their own right, for sure.
Yeah, like all those gags of like whatever, all those in jokes with on T-shirts and like signs, all that kind of stuff. I love all that.
Yeah, no, that's the animators, and it was and a lot of Mike Hollingsworth was our supervising director and co-AP on the show, and he just like had a list of like visual gags and visual things they could put in the background. Like they kept a running list over there to like, I say over there because animation was across the street from the writer's room. So when I visualize them, I'm always like, yeah, over there. They're doing great stuff over there. But yeah, that was all animation, all of those gags.
And also I want to talk about Interior Sub. And that episode is so interesting because really it like the plot of it is a heavy episode with BoJack like realizing he's talking to a therapist and then immediately abandoning it. So and then afterwards when then just shifts away from the whole thing with the angsty zebra, like the visuals of it. So with that one in particular, I wanted to know, did that come about first, like the framing device, or was it like with the personas, or was it first the story and then figuring out that aspect of that episode?
It was first the story. The idea when we first were writing it, and when I was working on it, it was I really wanted it to be the therapist and the mediator who are having dinner, who are not main characters in the show. We don't know them at all. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to have these two people talking about our main characters and having what their impression of our main characters were. But there wasn't that change of them being a zebra and being Princess Diana. That was like after my second draft, then Raphael came in and was like, hey, I have an idea that can really emphasize this theme of people telling stories about other people telling stories about characters we know, right? And I was like, oh, sure, what is it? And he was like, I think it's going to be Bobo the angsty zebra. And it was all Raphael. It just made me, like, he had it so clear in his head of, like, he's going to be a zebra, great. She's going to be Princess Diana, great. And then it just got more and more ridiculous, a tangled fog of pulsating earring in the form of a woman, so that was all him, and that was after the story was created, which was such a fun change that we had, yeah.
I love that. That's so cool. And then also I want to talk about Feel Good Story too. So I know I had read about that. You said it was basically like your love letter to Chicago, and there were things like there are basically 2 seasons here: bitter winter, unbearable humidity. That's so funny. So did you live in were you from Chicago or you lived there?
No, I'm not from Chicago at all, which was a big, I had to make sure I did it right. Chicago, I lived there right after I graduated college. So I lived in Chicago right after college and went there specifically to study at Second City improv comedy and to excel in improv comedy. And I think the reason I say it's such a love letter is I have such a special connection to Chicago because it was like my first big city that I lived in, first time being an adult, first time living on my own and paying rent that wasn't like college dorm world, you know what I mean? It was a very coming of age place for me. And yet at the same time, I'm still kind of this outsider. I'm not born and raised in Chicago. I'm not from Chicago, but I got a lot of pride in Chicago in that I went to this big city by myself and survived it. And so to me, it was fun to just reminisce and go back to all the things I remembered about Chicago. And there were a lot of other people on our show who were from Chicago, so I had a lot of people. There was even an animator who came over and explained to me something that I had gotten wrong, and so making sure that I didn't do something that made it so obvious that I wasn't born and raised in Chicago. But yes, one of my things about it was I'm from Colorado originally, so I thought I've dealt with cold and heat. And then I got to Chicago, and it was unbearably cold or super humidity. There was no in between. You were always kind of in a state of discomfort living in Chicago.
Wow.
And weirdly, I remember that fondly. I remember that time. So yeah, that's why I call it my love letter to Chicago, because it brought me back to when I was 22 and trying to figure out my life.
And then, fittingly, we have in that episode BoJack writing letters to Diane, so which is just great too. I love all that. With him.
Yeah. It was a way for him, because we knew that we wanted this to be a Diane episode, and I really was excited to write a Diane rom-com was what I was really wanting to do. And we knew, you can't, it's, the name of the show is BoJack Horseman. He needs to be in the episode. How do we have him continuously in an episode where he's not, he's in rehab, she's in Chicago, how do we have him involved? So that was a fun, I really liked the idea of creating that narrative device of just periodically we hear him writing letters and his letters coincide with what she's going through. So it was just a nice way to have BoJack in that episode without actually having him in that episode.
Right. And so then, did you come up with Guy, like her Guy? I love Guy.
Yes,
That's so sweet.
yes, I did. I'm very proud of Guy. Guy is one of my favorite characters. I had so much fun of like, I pitched it to Raphael, like, I think she goes to Chicago and she meets a guy, and his name should be Guy. And then we took it a step further, like his son is named Sonny, and his ex-wife is named Lady. Like, we just had a lot of fun with that. But I was actually picturing a guy. So then when Lisa Hannibal came out with the drawing of Guy being this bison, I was just delighted.
I love it.
He gets to be an animal. That's so great. And I love his look. I love his jacket. I love everything about Guy. So I'm very proud of Guy.
That's amazing. Yes. Oh my God. That's so cool. Okay, let's shift into The View from Halfway Down. I have a bunch of questions for this one in particular. Oh, and you should have won the Emmy. Just saying. Oh dear God. Okay, but so to start, so I know Raphael had had this idea for years. So what was your initial thoughts when this idea was pitched? Like, did you know you were going to end up writing this episode?
No, I did not know I was going to write it. I knew it was an episode we were going to do, and we didn't quite know when it was going to come into the season, and kind of how it works with Raphael. He's very fair in how he assigns episodes. I mean, he will give people specific episodes if it's like a good strong suit for them and a good idea to put them in it, but then he kind of goes into a rotation. And so kind of how I got the episode, I wish I could say it was because I was perfect for it, but it really was it landed on the episode where it was my turn in the rotation to get an episode. And I really thought Raphael was going to write it. I thought he was going to want to write it because it was such a important episode to him. So when he told me, "Oh, you're getting it," I was like, "Oh my goodness, oh no!" And then I felt like so much pressure because I knew it was going to be a big episode. I knew it was going to be an important episode. But yeah, the breaking of it, breaking mean just figuring out all the nuts and bolts of the episode. I actually found, once I got into the zone of it, and once I kind of knew, again, I knew the ending, it kind of flew out of me pretty easily. I kind of knew, like, okay, act 1 is him coming into this house, and we meet all these people, and it's very strange, and there's this bird in the living room, and there's that. Act 2 is the dinner, and Act 3 is the show. And so once I kind of knew that was the kind of structure of how we were going to do this episode, really it really just flowed out of me, being able to like figure out how things happen and the flow of that whole episode. So it was really fun. I was very scared, and then it got very fun.
That's good.
So that's what I can say. It was really fun. It was a real fun episode to write.
That's an amazing episode. Oh my God. I don't know if you know this. It is the highest rated episode on IMDb with a 9.9, and second is Free Churro and Time's Arrow with a 9.8. So like everyone agrees it's like the best episode of the series for sure.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so nice. I mean, it's really nice to be part of something. I mean, I'm just proud of being part of BoJack, but I will say, like, I didn't expect, like, people message me every day. I get something pretty much every day about View from Halfway Down, which I'm sure over time that won't be the case, but it really is something special to be a part of something that means a lot to many people, and it's been really nice. I didn't see that coming, so it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience.
You've kind of touched on what I was going to ask too, was essentially, were there any significant plot changes from early drafts to the final product of the episode?
Not really, no. Any plot changes? I think the biggest, I don't know. I think the biggest, it's hard to answer because that episode is so, like, cerebral, it's, so we did have changes here and there, like, discussing in this talent show, for instance, in Act 3, what are their talents? Like, what is everyone's talent going to be? And so, there's a lot of back and forth on that. There's a lot of back and forth on, what each character's point of view was during the dinner party scene, where everyone is kind of talking about what makes, the very philosophical conversations about what makes life worth living, or what is proof that you've had a good life. So there was a lot of dialogue and with all of the other writers about what everyone's point of view was and what everyone was going to say and how everything was going to flow. But it going from dinner to a show to then it getting very scary was always kind of the direction we were going in. And I know there's a lot of discussion on how to end it. Like, how do we end this? Like, what are we doing? And so the conversation of him on the phone and just the simple conversation of like, how was your day? My day was fine, which I think is really simple and heartbreaking. There's lots of thoughts on what was said when. So yeah, and whether or not we end the episode that way, or we end it with him waking up or anything like that. There's lots of discussion on that. But we always knew the direction it was going.
I know Raphael Bob Waxberg had said that he wanted the audience to know that BoJack was going to wake up, but he didn't want it like, oh, he just opens his eyes or something. So I'm assuming that with the ending, that, like, the thing with the, what it is called, like the beeps, and then I'll tell you the first time I watched that, I didn't even, like, it just went to the next episode, so I literally thought he was dead. I was like, oh my god, I was like losing my mind. It was so intense. So essentially what I'm just saying is that was a brilliant choice, having that with the flat line and the beeps over the credits. Oh my god, it was amazing.
Yeah, I always thought, that was a big sticking point with me, and the thing is, no matter what, it all goes through Raphael. This is his show, and this is what he wants. But I was very, like, my stance with him was, please give it some hope. Please don't end this episode where you think he's dead. Like, please don't. Like, I just felt like I just wanted to I think the show is about hope. Please don't have the last episode that I write for this show be like the most dismal episode ever. And so he knew that, but ultimately, it was his choice. And so, and also as a side note, Raphael has a big stance and strong opinion about streaming services that skip over the end credits of a show, as well as the option to skip over opening credits of the show. And he's not wrong. Like, I think his opinion is the credits are part of the show, and reading the credits and staying through the credits gives the respect of all those people whose names are coming by, all of their hard work. So to, like, skip over that, sucks. And so I do think there was two things that Raphael was thinking. One, I think he did want to give a little bit of hope, and that's why the beeping. And I think, I hope that I had something to do with that, because he knew that was very important to me as well. And so I remember when I finally saw the episode and saw that he did that, I called him immediately and was like, thank you so much for doing that. Like, that's what I wanted, so thanks. But I also do think it was a bit of him being like, oh, did you miss it? Well, you should watch the credits. Like, it was, I think there was a part of him that it was his way of saying, like, credits are important. Don't like, skimp on the credits. And so in a way, it's like a perfect Raphael move to have, like, be poignant, but also to, like, stick his, like, point across of, like, yeah, you need to stay and watch all the credits. And honestly, because of that, I do really try, now when I watch streaming stuff, I try to sit and watch through all the credits, because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. And also, like, read all the people's names and respect all the work that they did on the episode.
Absolutely. And I agree. It's like capturing that hope. That is, of course, part of the show of BoJack Horseman, for sure. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you approach, in particular, writing the poem? Was it challenging? Did it come easily, of just capturing this feeling of instant regret? It's a brilliant poem.
Oh, thanks. I was absolutely terrified to write the poem. I am not a poet. When I originally wrote the outline, I knew that I wanted Secretariat / BoJack's dad to read a poem, because it felt like a pretentious thing that someone would do at a talent show. Like, here's my original poem. So I thought that was, I thought it was just a joke. To me, it was just a quick joke. And what I thought he would do was stand up there and go, here's my poem. And before he starts reading it, he gets pushed into the door. and him realizing he's not ready to go. I thought that would be powerful, and we didn't have to hear a poem, and it would be all these things. And I turned in the outline, and Raphael was like, "Where's the poem?" And I was like, "Oh, there's not gonna be a poem." And he was like, "Alison, you can't set up a poem and then not have a poem. You have to now write a poem." And it really stressed me out because I personally, a fascination and a thing I love and a thing I love to hate is art within like television and movies. Like the example I use a lot is, have you seen She's All That?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Right, with Rachel Lee Cook. Love that movie. I'm not trying to shit on that movie, but she's supposed to be this like great artist. Like she does art, you know, she's an artist. And so there's all this buildup of her being this amazing artist. And then at the very end of the movie, you see that piece of artwork that she's been working on the whole movie, and it is terrible. Like, it is so bad. Or like, you know, when you see movies where people are like, "Here's my song," and the song is so bad, and you know that they were trying to make it good. Like, this is supposed to be good art, you know? So I was really scared to write this poem because I thought, well, I don't want it to, like, attempt to be good, but then it's actually really bad. You know, I was like, or do I lean in and try to make it bad for comedic purposes? Like, he maybe write a bad poem. And ultimately, Raphael was like, you have to write this poem. It should be called The View from Halfway Down. And it should be about that experience that he had. So I was really nervous, because so basically I felt he was asking me to try to write a good poem. I was like, okay, oh boy, here we go. And a thing, the story I always tell, the thing that really helped me was my husband. I was home working on the draft, like laying in bed being like, I can't write a poem. What does this poem, like, and I knew I had to like write it separately than the script. I knew I needed to like sit down and just really work on a poem. And I was like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to do. And my husband actually wrote me a poem and gave it to me before he went to work. And it was just this little poem that he thought of in the shower, like a little, you know, just a quick little thing. And the reason he did that was just to say, like, anyone can write a poem. Like, look around and rhyme things, and you can just try it. Just give it a try. And that little poem, like, was my thing of, like, yeah, if my husband can do it, and he's not even a professional writer, like, I can do it. And that really gave me the, like, confidence to, like, really sit down and write through it. And there are little lines that I'm really proud of, and there's parts of that poem that I'm really proud that came out of me. I still don't count myself as a poet. Like, I once said, like, because someone asked me if the whole poem was written by me, and I said, well, Raphael wrote a verse in the middle. He did. He added what I called a verse. But then Raphael, after I wrote that in a response to somebody, Raphael text messaged me going, Alison, they're not called verses in poems, they're called stanzas.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't, okay, yes, I'm sorry, I mean stanza. Raphael wrote a stanza in the middle, but he expanded the poem so it would be a little bit longer. So yeah, I'm really, really proud of it, and I was very scared to write it. I never would have thought the response people have had to that poem specifically, never in a million. I was just happy that the writers didn't laugh at me when I brought it in. And so the fact that it's gone the opposite direction and people saying it's a really great poem and it means a lot to them has been really wonderful, and more than anything, a relief. Like, I'm just glad it's not like Rachel Lee Cook's painting and She's All That people make fun of from years and years from now. I'm happy that hasn't happened.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing poem. And so specifically also about Butterscotch / Secretariat, was like, because it's Secretariat, but it's really his dad. It's just so fascinating. And then the whole conversation with BoJack, when then he's saying how I cared so much, I wanted you to respect me, I wanted you to love me, I was afraid that you would know that. And since this is all taking place in BoJack's head, do you feel that this, like, that was essentially really him speaking to his son, or do you think that's what BoJack always wanted his father to say to him?
I love that scene. I love that was also a scene I was really proud of writing between him and his dad / secretariat. I love the ambiguity of it because I think it's the conversation BoJack always wanted with his dad that he never got to have. And I like that mystery of like, is it just BoJack talking to himself in a way that he wishes his dad spoke to him? Or is this true about his dad? Is this something that maybe deep down BoJack knew about his father and understood about his father's behavior? Like I've always really enjoyed BoJack's dynamic with his parents, and I've found his parents really fascinating characters on the show because, you know, people who are broken, you usually blame the parents, right? Like BoJack is a broken person. The parents did that to him. But usually they did that because they're also broken and wanting to have some goodness to them, or hope that there was maybe at one time some goodness to them. And so I like that. I think that's up for interpretation. I think there's something really neat about the ambiguity of that scene, of whether or not this was a true, real conversation he had with his dad, or is this a conversation he had with himself.
And also what's interesting to me too, that so I've watched this episode only twice, and the second time I was crying the first time I was like freaking out because I thought he was dead, but the second time I was in tears. But so what I love obviously about this show, that you could watch it so many times, pick up on something different each time, of course. And so with this one in particular, what I didn't necessarily pick up on was that when each of the characters performs and then they go through the door, when like it's basically how they died in a way, like with that interaction with the door. So was that something in the script, or was that something with Amy Winfrey, the director, with that stuff in particular?
I think it was a blend of both. We knew how a lot of these people died. And so with talking about what talent they did, really was us also trying to figure out a way to interpret their life and death at the same time. So it was in the script, but also, yes, it was definitely Amy and her team. I can't, it's not like I said, and now they hop here and they do this here and they do this here. You know, I wrote something like Beatrice dances and it's beautiful. And so all of that choreography of Beatrice dancing, that's all the animators. So, I would say it's like a blend of both. And having that simulation, which I thought was so cool as well, of just seeing this kind of simulation of people kind of replicating how they went.
Because I know also with the dinner scene too, of course, with what they're eating too, is connected to essentially how they died, or just the last thing they ate. So like with BoJack, with of course the pills, and then when I first watched it thinking that he has vodka in the bottle, but then he takes a sip, it's the chlorine. So all building up to how he's in real life, drowning in the pool. And it adds to that sense of suspense and scariness, honestly, which is amazing, though, to be able to construe all that in the episode.
Yeah, I love how scary the episode got, especially because I don't like being scared. Like
Same.
I'm a wuss. I don't watch scary movies. I don't watch anything like that. So to me, like, to be able to write something scary and to, again, see the animators interpret it and do make you freak out, I think was a really cool moment, especially because to me, my big thing with writing this episode is like, I'm very scared to die. I'm very, very scared to die. It's terrifying to me. And so the fact that I got to kind of write that and work out those kind of demons while writing it, and then to see the episode where you're like, in the end, seeing the animation of like how scary it was for BoJack, it was like really satisfying. Because I was like, yes, that's how it feels. It's so scary. It would be so scary.
With the blackness, like with the inky goo, you know, like, oh my god, with the goo coming after him this whole time, basically him trying to run from it. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's so good.
Absolutely.
They were amazing. The animation team is so good.
I'll tell you, in particular, my favorite part of the episode is that whole final sequence with the conversation with BoJack and Diane. And I know Peter Merriman, like, he storyboarded all of that. Oh my god, it's so brilliant, because what's so devastating, though, is that we know what happened, that conversation in real life. But within this episode, it's like him with these final moments of him just wanting this comfort and this familiarity and hearing this person's voice whom he loves. And it's just so brilliant. Oh my god. So that's my favorite part of the episode. Do you have a favorite moment in the episode?
I do really like that moment. I like the stillness of that moment. I really like the phone with the cord. I like the really long cord of the phone in that moment. I like so many things in this episode for so many reasons. Like, I'm just so proud to say, like, I was part of all of it. I really enjoyed, I'm really proud of the dinner party conversations and the fact that you can watch that scene over and over again and find different things, such as, you know, Sarah Lynn aging every few moments, or all the food. Yeah, people picking up on the food that they're eating. And I think that scene is also really a fun blend of comedy and tragedy. Like, I think it is serious, and this is a dramatic episode, but I think there was really fun moments in that dinner scene of, like, still comedy, of still having good comedy, some good punchlines, some good funny things. I'm also, like I said, really proud of BoJack talking to his father and standing in front of that beautiful moon. I really love. I love Sarah Lynn's song is both funny and heartbreaking. I love how much the poem. I'm sorry, I'm just like gushing.
No, I love
this
it.
Episode.
Yes. Oh my God.
I love the poem. And actually, you know what? I'd say my favorite moment, and maybe it's because it's a line that I had from the beginning, is when he's talking to Herb. And he says, "See you on the other side." And Herb goes like, "No, BoJack, there is no other side. This is it." For me, that was an important thing that I wanted to write in this episode. So the fact that it came from, like, writing it on a whiteboard all the way until the very end, I'm very proud of that little chunk of dialogue and that little bit of him of Herb being dissolved in his orange suit. I really enjoyed that.
So when you watched it for the first time, was there anything in particular that took you by surprise about it, whether in the animation or in the background, just like as a fan watching it for the first time?
I watched it by myself really late at night.
Oh, no.
I don't recommend for anyone.
I did too, actually. Oh my God. Yeah, I just realized I did too the first time. Oh, shit.
I really wish I watched it with someone holding my hand. But I didn't. The biggest shock to me was the heart monitor beep at the very end. The things that I liked that surprised me that I didn't know about were the very beginning, the paintings in the background all kind of told a story and are part of the kind of mystery. So I really enjoyed that. And I also really enjoyed when they walked out onto the porch, when it was BoJack and his dad. A big surprise to me was I had written that it was a porch. I had written that it was like a backyard porch. And the fact that Amy and her team decided to make it the bridge was a nice touch and a nice surprise. So yeah, those are probably my surprising moments.
One more thing about this episode was, what are your thoughts when people say that it should have been the final episode of the show?
I so disagree with that. Like, people who, I just completely disagree that should have been the final episode. I think Raphael's episode, Nice While It Lasted, is an amazing finale of television. It also is like, his episode is also just our main characters. No other characters speak in that episode. It's just our five main people. And this show ultimately, in my opinion, is about hope. And it's about, you know, it's not like life sucks and then you die. I mean, they say it in the finale of, like, you know, life sucks and then you keep on living. The fact that you should keep on living and there always is something around the corner to make life worth living. I think Raphael's finale is such a nice send-off of all of our characters. I think View from Halfway Down is a very memorable and poignant episode for so many reasons, but I think it's kind of a standalone, fascinating episode where I think the finale itself is the hopeful episode that I think is what BoJack is all about. And I think you need the two next to each other is very nice. I think they're a nice pairing. But no, this should not have been the finale. Never should have been the finale. No way. Should not be how the show ends. No.
I wholeheartedly agree. And so then, overall with BoJack, like, do you have a favorite joke, like, overall that you contributed to the show, whether in one of your episodes or just in general?
Oh my God. Favorite joke. Let's see. Well, everyone else is so funny on the show. Like, I feel like so many of my favorite jokes are the jokes of other people. one stupid joke. I'll just tell you, this is, I don't know if this is the right answer. It's just the first one to pop in my head, so
Sure.
I don't like waste your time going, I
No
don't
worries.
know. It was a little joke. It's so stupid, but I love little stupid jokes.
Me too.
Was in the Halloween episode, which I think is in season
5, right?
5, yeah.
Mr. Peanut Butter's booze?
It's Mr. Peanut Butter's
Yeah.
booze. It's all of his. So it's Mr. Peanut Butter, and it's kind of us learning about his patterns in terms of his codependency on women. And there's a moment when he's like, "Oh, so I keep getting older, and they stay the same age. All right."
Yeah.
All right, which of course is just a callback to Matthew McConaughey's line in Dazed and Confused, which is like, the best thing about high school girls is I get older and they stay the same age. And then he goes, all right, you know, like, and the delivery of Paula Tompkins being like, all right. I was just so proud of that little gem of a stupid joke that got in. It's just a shout out to Dazed and Confused.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that joke.
Amazing. Oh my God. So I know, of course, you're currently a writer on The Tonight Show, which is so amazing. So what's been your favorite part of that experience so far? I know obviously it's difficult, what with this pandemic, working remotely, that is, but...
Yeah, I mean, so I actually just finished up on The Tonight Show at the beginning of this month.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I'm actually starting a new project on Netflix with Mike Hollingsworth, who is was the supervising director on BoJack, as well as another animator named Joel Trussell. So I'm very excited about that.
Awesome.
So that's in the works now. But yes, I was on the Tonight Show for this past year, and to be honest, it was so fascinating to be on a daily show that is running during a pandemic. I will just never forget this experience, because it was our job. It was Jimmy Fallon's job to figure out how to do a show, first of all, from like his house. Like, while this started, he went to his home and filmed it on his iPhone. And so to be part of a show that was really just, we were all just flying by the seat of our pants and figuring this out. And I think there's been something so interesting about television in its ability to like adapt quickly within certain parameters, which is what this pandemic has done. And then on top of the pandemic, this being the election, this is just like, we're living in history right now. You know what I mean? Like, we are in history with all of the things going on in the world right now. And so to be on a daily show, that my job was to read the news, which was very hard, my job, but to read the news and figure out what are the jokes, what are the things people are talking about, and how do we deliver these jokes in a way that people at the end of their day of this being a strange time can like sit back and laugh and just like enjoy themselves. And I think that I will just never forget the mighty task of that, and getting to work with so many really incredible, funny writers who think so fast. That was the other thing, is I've had to learn. It taught me to create comedy quickly. You know, in BoJack, we got to have weeks of talking about things and working on things, whereas the Tonight Show was like, oh, I have to write 10 jokes in an hour and send that to Jimmy and see if he likes any of them to say on the air tonight, you know? So that was, I mean, I think the experience as a whole has been just such a memorable one that I will never forget for the rest of my life. I mean, Fallon was the job I had in the year 2020, which is crazy. So yeah, that was, overall, it was just a crazy, wonderful experience.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And do you have a favorite bit that you wrote for that show in particular?
Oh, you know what? Where is it? They just, again, because I finished up, back in when we were all in the studio, Jimmy writes all of his jokes on note cards, which is a pretty classic SNL-esque thing, just handwritten poster board. And so my very, very first joke that got on the air, someone went down to set and stole the note cards, stole the giant, like stole the big cards of my first joke, and they just mailed it to me. So my very first joke, I don't know if it was my favorite. You're gonna learn I do stupid jokes. So this was my first joke. It says, And yesterday, people noticed massive bags of Mexican food were delivered to Congress. So I guess this is nacho average impeachment trial.
Oh, man. Yes,
So,
puns, love it.
and so I'm going to frame these and put it on my wall of my stupid nacho joke that I got on Jimmy Fallon.
Amazing. So cool. Oh my God. So great. This has been so wonderful, Alison. So really my last question for you is, it's basically actually a two-part question, is what advice do you have for writers trying to break into the industry? And then once they're in the industry, what advice do you have for writers?
Okay, so for writers, let me think. I want to be thoughtful about this. Well, I feel like intuitive, or it feels logical, but I do think it's important to say, which is if you want to be a writer, you have to write.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've met a lot of people who have moved out here and are really wanting to break in, and I'll say something to them like, hey, send me, do you have a writing sample? Send me a script. And they'll be like, oh, I'm working on it. And there it is. It's scary. It's scary to give your material to people. It's scary to finish a script. But, like, you have to, like, do it. You have to. And you have to write, you're going to write really bad scripts. So you have to write, like, your first 3 bad scripts before your 4th one is good. So you might as well just get it over with and write. I think, so, start a script and finish a script, and then learn from that script and revise it or start again. And if you want to be a writer, you have to write. You have to sit down and actually do it. And it is very scary. Like you were saying, like the blank page is very scary, but the only way that you can get good at it is by doing it. And so for people wanting to break in, be prepared to have multiple scripts and be prepared to, write a bad script, give it to someone and have them tell you all the reasons it's bad and then learn from it. I know that it seems very vague, but I do think people, they want to write and then they get scared to. And I think, to me, it's like pulling off the Band-Aid. You just got to do it. And then I forgot, I'm sorry, what was your
No problem. Yeah. That's very good advice, though, absolutely, because it's just like you got to put in the work. You have to do it. But then, so my second part of that question was, once writers are in the industry, what advice do you have, whether they're just getting started or just whatever, like once they're in the industry, to keep the momentum going, essentially, what advice do you have?
It's so scary. I think if I have any advice or I guess I would say this is more insight. It's such a scary job because all the jobs end at some point. You know what I mean? It's not like a job you can get in an office where you can have the same job for 40 years. I mean, maybe unless you want to be on The Simpsons or something. But to write on television, no matter what, even if you're at a job for a very long time, the show always ends. And so to be prepared that even if you are successful in that you've gotten the really great job, once the job is over, you are back on the hunt again. And to be prepared for that mentally, because that's very hard. It's very hard mentally to deal with, like, being unemployed after, I mean, for me, for example, like, once BoJack wrapped, I was unemployed for a while before I got on Fallon. And those months are, like, you kind of feel like you're in this, like, free dive, you just kind of like, you're, like, just looking for the next job. So I think it's important to know that this happens to everybody. Everyone who's a writer goes through this. To be smart financially with that, to make sure that you save your money accordingly, knowing that you will go through periods of time where you're not working, and to just keep writing and just keep working on the things that you love to do, and just know that there's going to be ebb and flow to this job. I don't think I know of anyone who's had a constant, except for the people who are like, showrunner, like Shonda Rhimes is going to be fine for the rest of her life, right? But like, I think as a working writer, you're going to have riches and then you're also going to have rags. Like, it's that back and forth, and to just know that that's part of the deal.
Also, one last quick thing. Do you have any, like, shows you're currently watching or recently watched that you'd like to recommend?
Oh my gosh, right? Because we're all in this pandemic.
Yes, exactly.
So I would love show recommendations too. Let's see, what am I watching right now? It's funny because you want to also, like, I'm watching a lot of lighter, fair things, such as, I'm human, so I'm watching Great British Bake Off every Friday.
Nice.
Those kind of lighter things.
Yeah.
stuff that has come out during this pandemic that I've really enjoyed. I really loved the most recent season of Dead to Me. I love Dead to Me, which is on Netflix. I also really loved, Hulu came out with a movie called Palm Springs that I think is very incredible and super watchable and rewatchable. What else am I? And I'm also watching Doctor Who. I highly recommend being a nerd and like, if you're in a pandemic and you've been questioning whether or not to become a nerd and jump into like a show like Doctor Who or Star Trek or anything that has had a long run, now is the time to do it.
Very true. Oh my goodness. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, Alison. Please let everyone know where they can find you on social media and anything else you'd like to promote.
Oh, sure. I'm on Twitter, and it's just my name, at Alison Tafel, ALISONTAFEL. I'm also on Instagram. Again, I'm not that original, so it's still my name, at Alison Tafel. And yeah, watch Jimmy Fallon. I know I'm no longer on the show, but people are working really hard on that show, and thanks for watching BoJack. It means a lot.
Oh my God, I could always talk about BoJack forever. I love BoJack so much. Oh my goodness.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's nice to talk about it. I'm very proud of it, and it's nice to know that you're such a big fan. It's wonderful.
And with that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Be sure to check out storytellingsaga.com, and feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, I won't even give a quote. I usually give a quote, but I'll just do this. Da-da-da-da. I will be discussing The Addams Family, specifically the 1991 movie. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.